The letter arrived on a morning thick with fog, carried by a messenger who would not meet my eyes. I sat in the small stone house that had become my exile, my prison, my penance, and I broke the seal with hands that had not held a sword in 15 years. The Grand Master's words were brief, almost curt. "Brother Arnaud, the Order has need of you. Come to Paris by the feast of Saint Michael. What was taken from you may yet be restored." I read those words 3 times, trying to find some hidden meaning, some explanation for why they would summon me now after so many years of silence. I had been forgotten, deliberately erased from the rolls of the temple, my name struck from every record after the accusation that had destroyed my life. And now, inexplicably, they remembered. Now, when I was 53 years old, when my hair had gone gray and my body had softened from years without training, when I had made my peace with living out my days in obscurity, they called me back. I should have burned the letter, should have sent the messenger away with no reply, should have protected the small measure of peace I had built from the ruins of my former life. Instead, I began to pack. The accusation had come during the siege of Acre, in the final desperate days before the city fell. I was 38 then, a veteran of 20 years' service, a knight commander responsible for the defense of the northern wall. We were losing, had been losing for months, the Saracen forces pressing ever closer despite our best efforts to hold them back. Resources were scarce, morale was broken, and everyone knew the end was approaching. In those circumstances, men did things they would not ordinarily do. They stole supplies, they deserted their posts, they made quiet arrangements with the enemy to preserve their own lives when the walls finally fell. I was accused of the worst of these crimes, selling information to Saladin's forces, betraying the positions of our defenses, taking payment in gold to ensure my own survival when the city was taken. The charges were brought by Brother Gaston, a knight I had disciplined repeatedly for drunkenness and dereliction of duty, a man who hated me with the peculiar intensity of someone who knows he deserves the punishment he receives. He presented evidence, letters supposedly in my hand, testimony from merchants who claimed to have carried messages between me and the Saracen commanders, even a purse of gold coins found hidden in my quarters. I denied everything, of course. The letters were forgeries, the testimony was purchased, the gold was planted. But in a besieged city on the verge of collapse, with paranoia running through the ranks like plague, with everyone looking for someone to blame for our impending defeat, my denials meant nothing. The tribunal convened by the Grand Master heard the evidence and reached their verdict with disturbing speed. Guilty of treason, guilty of betraying my vows, guilty of crimes that demanded execution. But the Grand Master, perhaps moved by my years of faithful service, perhaps uncertain of the evidence, perhaps simply reluctant to execute a senior knight when we could ill afford to lose any fighting men, offered me an alternative. I would be expelled from the order, my name removed from all records, my service forgotten as though I had never existed. I would be sent away in disgrace, forbidden to wear the white mantle or bear arms or speak to any brother of the temple for the remainder of my life. Or I could refuse these terms and face the executioner's blade. I chose exile. I chose life, even if that life was emptied of everything that had given it meaning. I have spent 15 years wondering if I made the right choice. I left Acre 3 days before the walls fell, smuggled out through the water gate in the darkness before dawn, given a small purse of coins and directions to a house in the French countryside where the order sometimes kept brothers who had been disgraced or who had broken under the strain of service. The house was in Burgundy, isolated, surrounded by forest, maintained by an old lay brother who asked no questions and spoke only when necessary. I lived there for 15 years, working the small garden, repairing the roof when it leaked, chopping wood for the fire, existing in a kind of suspended state that was neither life nor death, but something hollow between the two. I tried at first to maintain the disciplines of the order, rising at the hours of prayer, training with a wooden sword in the clearing behind the house, keeping my body strong against the day when I might be called back to service. But as months became years, as no summons came and no vindication arrived, I gradually surrendered those disciplines. Why maintain a warrior's body for a war I would never fight again? Why pray the hours when God had clearly abandoned me to this fate? I let myself soften, let the routines slip away, let the days blur into one another unmarked and unmemorable. The journey to Paris took me 3 weeks. I had no horse, no funds beyond the few coins I had saved, no companions except the memories that traveled with me whether I wished them to or not. I walked the roads I had once traveled as a knight, through villages that had been rebuilt since the wars, past fields that had lain fallow and were now planted again. The world had moved on in my absence. New kings ruled, new conflicts had arisen and been resolved, and I was walking through a country that felt at once familiar and completely foreign. People looked at me strangely, a gray-haired man in peasant clothes walking alone, speaking to no one, and I realized with a kind of bitter amusement that I had become exactly what the order had made me. A ghost, a man without identity, forgotten by everyone including myself. When I reached Paris, I made my way to the Temple Fortress, that great sprawling complex in the Marais where the order kept its French headquarters, and I presented myself at the gate with the letter from the Grand Master. The guard looked at me skeptically, called for his sergeant, and eventually I was escorted through courtyards I had once walked freely as a brother, past knights who did not recognize me, to a small chamber where I was told to wait. The Grand Master who had condemned me was long dead, replaced by Jacques de Molay, a man I knew only by reputation. He entered the chamber without ceremony, accompanied by 2 senior knights whose faces were harder than I remembered faces being in my time. De Molay studied me with eyes that missed nothing, taking in my worn clothes, my softened body, my hands that bore calluses from gardening rather than from weapons. "You are Arnaud de Villiers?" he asked, though clearly he knew the answer. I nodded. I was once. I do not know what I am now. He sat across from me and spoke with unexpected directness. "Brother Gaston confessed on his deathbed 3 months ago that he fabricated the charges against you. He was in debt to merchants who threatened to expose his gambling to the order, unless he found a way to pay them. The gold found in your quarters was his own, planted there after he stole it from the strong room. The letters were forged by a clerk he paid. The testimony was purchased from men who would have said anything for coin. You were innocent. The order wronged you grievously." I sat in silence, trying to process words I had dreamed of hearing for 15 years. Words that should have brought relief or vindication or joy, but instead brought only a strange emptiness. 15 years, I finally said. 15 years of exile for crimes I did not commit. And now you tell me I was innocent? De Molay had the grace to look uncomfortable. The evidence seemed compelling at the time. Brother Gaston was believed to be trustworthy. The tribunal made the best judgment they could with the information available. But yes, we were wrong, and you have suffered unjustly. I laughed then, a sound without humor, and I saw the 2 senior knights tense, hands moving toward their swords. "What do you want from me, Grand Master? An absolution for the order's conscience? Permission to sleep better knowing you have acknowledged your mistake? I cannot give you that. I cannot give you anything. You took everything from me, my honor, my brotherhood, my purpose. You cannot return those things with an apology and expect me to be grateful." De Molay did not flinch from my anger. "You are right," he said quietly. "We cannot undo what was done. We cannot give you back those 15 years, but we can offer you a choice, the choice you should have been given originally. The order is facing a crisis unlike anything in our history. King Philip of France, whose debts to us are vast and whose treasury is empty, is preparing to move against us. We have evidence that he plans to arrest every Templar in France to accuse us of heresies and crimes in order to justify seizing our properties and wealth. We need men we can trust absolutely, men whose loyalty to the order is beyond question, men who understand what is at stake and who will not break under interrogation or turn traitor when offered clemency." He leaned forward, his eyes locked on mine. "I am offering you full restoration to the order, with rank and honors commensurate with your years of service. Your name will be returned to the rolls, your exile declared void, your reputation restored. In exchange, I need you to undertake a mission that may determine whether the temple survives this crisis or is destroyed utterly. Will you hear what I ask before you decide? I wanted to refuse, wanted to walk away from this offer that came 15 years too late, wanted to return to my small house and the empty peace I had built there. But something in Demole's eyes, desperation perhaps, or genuine respect, or simply the recognition that he was offering me the only thing he could offer, made me nod. "Speak," I said. "I will listen, though I promise nothing." He told me then of King Philip's plans, of the web of accusations being prepared, of the arrests that would come soon, perhaps within weeks. "We cannot fight this openly," he explained. "Philip has the Pope's tacit support, has laid his groundwork too carefully, but we have one chance. A document that proves Philip's true motivation. A letter between the king and his chief minister discussing their plans to fabricate charges and seize our wealth. This document is being held by a papal clerk in Avignon, a man who has developed a conscience about what he has witnessed. He is willing to provide us with the letter, but he will not send it by messenger, and he will not give it to anyone he does not trust completely. You are unknown, Arnaud. Your name has been struck from our records. Your face is not familiar to Philip's spies. You can travel to Avignon as a simple pilgrim, meet with this clerk, and bring the document back to Paris before Philip moves against us." I understood immediately why he had chosen me, why I had been summoned from exile for this particular task. I was expendable. If I was caught, if I was arrested, if the mission failed, the order could deny any knowledge of me, could truthfully say I was not in their records, was not one of their knights. I would disappear into Philip's dungeons and no one would ask questions, no one would demand answers. My restoration to the order was contingent on success. If I failed, I would simply remain what I had been for 15 years, forgotten, erased, a ghost who had never existed. Demole saw my understanding and did not insult me by denying it. "I will not lie to you," he said. "This mission is dangerous. If you are discovered, we cannot help you. If you are arrested, we cannot claim you. You will be alone, as you have been alone for 15 years. But if you succeed, you will have saved the order. You will have proven your loyalty beyond any doubt, and you will be restored to everything that was taken from you." I sat in silence for a long time, weighing my options, examining my motives, trying to understand what I truly wanted. Did I want restoration? Did I want to be a Templar again after 15 years of exile? Or did I simply want revenge against the order that had wronged me, against the brothers who had believed lies about me, against the God who had let me suffer for crimes I did not commit? In the end, the decision was simpler than I expected. I was 53 years old, living a half-life in obscurity, marked by bitterness and regret, waiting to die without ever having truly lived since the day I was exiled. This mission offered me a chance, however small, to matter again, to serve a purpose beyond mere existence, to prove to myself, if not to anyone else, that I was still the man I had been before everything was taken from me. "I will go," I told Demole, "not because I forgive the order for what was done to me, not because I expect restoration will heal 15 years of injustice, but because this mission is a better death than rotting in that house in Burgundy. And if I must die, I would rather die doing something that matters." Demole nodded, unsurprised by my answer. "You leave tomorrow at dawn. I will provide you with everything you need. Documents identifying you as a merchant, funds for your journey, contacts in Avignon, who can help you find the papal clerk. May God guide your steps and protect you in this undertaking." I almost laughed at that last part. God had not guided or protected me for 15 years. I had no reason to expect he would start now. The journey south to Avignon was long and dangerous, through territories where bandits preyed on travelers and local lords extracted tolls from anyone crossing their lands. I traveled as a merchant, carrying a pack of cheap goods that would justify my presence on the road, staying in taverns and monasteries, keeping my head down and my mouth shut. I had forgotten how to move through the world this way, had spent so long in isolation that I had lost the skills of disguise and discretion that were second nature during my years of service. But the skills returned gradually, muscle memory of a different kind, and by the time I reached Avignon, I was once again what I needed to be: anonymous, unremarkable, invisible. The papal court at Avignon was a city unto itself, a sprawling complex of palaces and churches and administrative buildings where thousands of clergy and functionaries managed the business of the universal church. I found lodging in a cheap inn near the river and began the careful work of locating the papal clerk who possessed the document I needed. The contacts de Molay had given me were cautious, speaking in hints and suggestions rather than direct information, but eventually I learned that the clerk was named Michel, that he worked in the chancery, and that he could be found most evenings at a particular tavern near the papal palace. I found him there 3 nights after my arrival, a thin man of middle years with the pale skin and ink-stained fingers of someone who spent his days bent over documents in poorly lit rooms. I watched him for an hour before approaching, making certain he was not being watched, that no one seemed to take unusual interest in his movements. Then I sat beside him at the bar and spoke the words I had been given. "I am told you have information about debts owed to merchants in Paris." He turned to look at me, his eyes searching my face for something I could not name, and after a long moment he nodded slightly. "Not here," he said quietly. "Tomorrow, after Vespers, in the chapel of Saint Anne. Come alone." Then he left the tavern without another word, and I sat there wondering whether I had just arranged a meeting or walked into a trap. The next evening I went to the chapel he had named, a small forgotten place in the older section of the palace complex, and I found him waiting in the shadows near the altar. He studied me again with that same searching look, then finally spoke. "Why should I trust you? How do I know you are who you claim to be, that you are not one of Philip's agents sent to test my loyalty?" I had prepared for this question, had thought carefully about how to answer it. "You should not trust me," I said simply. "You have no reason to trust me. But I will tell you something true, something only someone connected to the temple would know." And then I told him about my exile, about the false accusation and the years of isolation, about the fact that my name did not appear in any Templar records because it had been erased. "If I were Philip's agent," I said, "I would claim to be a knight in good standing, would present documents proving my identity, would give you every reason to believe I had authority. But I am telling you the truth, that I am forgotten, erased, a ghost sent on this mission precisely because I do not exist in any record that Philip's spies might discover. Believe me or do not. Give me the document or refuse. But I have traveled far to be here, and I will not return without what I came for." He was silent for a long time, then reached inside his robe and withdrew a sealed letter. "This is the document you seek. It contains correspondence between King Philip and his minister discussing the plan to destroy the Templar order and seize its wealth. With this letter, the order can prove that the charges being prepared are false, motivated by greed rather than genuine concern for heresy. Guard it with your life, for if Philip's agents learn of its existence, they will kill to prevent it from reaching Paris." I took the letter and tucked it inside my shirt, feeling the weight of it, the responsibility it represented. "Why are you doing this?" I asked. "You are risking your position, perhaps your life, to help an order that has many enemies. What do you gain?" Michel smiled sadly. "I gain nothing except the chance to sleep at night without shame. I have seen what is being prepared, have read the false testimony being collected, have watched powerful men manufacture evidence against innocent people. I took vows when I joined the church, vows to serve truth, to protect the innocent, to oppose injustice. This is how I keep those vows. Perhaps you understand something about the cost of keeping vows, even when doing so is inconvenient or dangerous." I understood perfectly. I thanked him and left the chapel, knowing I would probably never see him again, hoping that his conscience would not prove too expensive when Philip's agents inevitably learned who had betrayed their plans. I had the document. Now I had to survive the journey back to Paris, had to evade whatever watchers Philip had set to prevent exactly what I had just done, had to complete the mission, and perhaps earn back what had been stolen from me 15 years ago. The journey north was when everything went wrong. I had been careful in Avignon, had taken precautions, had avoided patterns that might draw attention. But someone had noticed anyway. Someone had seen me meet with Michel, or had been watching him, and saw him pass me the document. 3 days north of Avignon, on a lonely stretch of road through forest, 6 men emerged from the trees ahead of me, armed and armored, clearly not simple bandits. Their leader, a knight wearing Philip's colors, spoke with calm certainty. "You are carrying something that belongs to the king. Give it to us, and you may go free. Resist, and you will die here in this forest, and your body will feed the wolves." I looked at them, 6 trained warriors against one aging man who had not held a sword in combat for 15 years, and I understood that I had no chance of fighting my way through them. But I also understood that if I gave them the document, everything I had done would be meaningless, the order would be destroyed, and I would return to my exile having accomplished nothing. So I did the only thing I could do. I ran. I plunged into the forest off the road, hearing them shout behind me, hearing the crash of their pursuit through the undergrowth. I was slower than I had been in my youth, my body softened by years of peaceful living, but I knew forests, had trained in terrain like this during my years as a knight. I used every trick I remembered, doubling back on my trail, moving through streams to hide my scent, climbing trees to let them pass beneath me, staying silent even when my lungs screamed for air. They hunted me through the afternoon and into the evening, and twice I nearly ran directly into their arms, saved only by luck or God's intervention or some instinct I had forgotten I possessed. As darkness fell, I found a hollow beneath the roots of a massive oak and I crawled inside, pulling branches over the entrance, lying still and silent, while I listened to them search nearby. So close I could hear their breathing, could hear their frustration as they failed to find me. They camped that night within shouting distance of where I hid, and I remained in that hollow, not moving, barely breathing, the document pressed against my chest, my body screaming from the cramped position but my will refusing to give in, refusing to surrender what I had been sent to retrieve. They gave up the search near noon the next day, convinced perhaps that I had escaped, that I had gotten further than I actually had. I listened to them right away and I remained hidden for another hour before crawling out of my shelter, my body stiff and aching, my clothes filthy, my face scratched and bleeding from branches and thorns. But I had the document still, and I was alive, and I began walking north again, more carefully now, avoiding roads, traveling only at night, making my way slowly toward Paris through a landscape that seemed suddenly full of enemies. It took me 3 weeks to complete a journey that should have taken 1, 3 weeks of hunger and exhaustion and constant fear of discovery. 3 weeks during which I had ample time to question why I was doing this, why I did not simply destroy the document and return to my exile, why I cared about an order that had forgotten me, and a God who seemed equally indifferent to my suffering. I found no good answers to those questions, but I kept walking anyway, driven by something deeper than logic, some core of stubbornness or duty, or perhaps simple pride that would not allow me to fail, even when failure would have been easier. I reached Paris on a cold October morning, ragged and half-starved, my clothes in tatters, looking more like a beggar than a messenger on the order's most important mission. The guards at the temple fortress did not want to admit me, saw only a filthy vagabond claiming urgent business with the Grand Master, but I had the letter de Molay had given me, and eventually they reluctantly escorted me to the same chamber where I had met him 2 months earlier. He arrived quickly, took one look at my condition, and immediately called for the infirmary. But I shook my head and reached inside my shirt for the document, withdrawing it with hands that trembled from exhaustion. "This is what you sent me for," I said. "Philip's agents knew I had it, chased me, nearly caught me. You have a spy in your inner circle, someone who told them about the mission. But I brought it back. I kept it safe. Now tell me, was it worth it? Was this document worth what it cost?" De Molay took the letter with something like reverence, broke the seal, read its contents. His face went pale, then hard, then resolved. "It is exactly what we needed. Proof that Philip's charges are false, that this is nothing but a scheme to seize our wealth. With this, we can appeal to the Pope, can force him to examine the accusations more carefully, can perhaps prevent the destruction of the order." He looked at me, really looked at me, seeing not just a useful tool but a man who had sacrificed everything to complete his mission. "You have saved us, Brother Arnaud. Whatever was taken from you, whatever injustice you suffered, you have repaid it 1,000-fold. Your restoration is complete, your rank and honors confirmed, your name returned to the rolls of the order. You are one of us again, a knight of the temple in full standing with all the rights and privileges that entails. But I found that I did not care about restoration anymore, did not want the rank or the honors or the acknowledgement of my restored position. Something had changed during that desperate flight through the forest, during the long walk north, during the weeks of suffering and fear and questioning. I had discovered that I did not need the order's validation, did not require their recognition to know who I was and what I was worth. I had completed the mission not for them but for myself, had proven to myself that the man I had been still existed beneath the years of exile and bitterness, that faith and duty and honor were not things the order could give or take away, but things I carried within myself regardless of circumstance. I do not want restoration, I told de Molay, and I saw surprise flicker across his face. I do not want to be a knight again, do not want to wear the white mantle or speak vows I no longer fully believe. I completed your mission because it was what I was asked to do, because I am apparently incapable of refusing when duty calls, because some part of me will always be a Templar even though I no longer wish to be one. But I am done. Send me back to my house in Burgundy. Strike my name from the rolls again if you must, or leave it there. I do not care. I want only to return to the quiet life I built, to the peace I found in exile, and I want to be left alone to live out whatever years remain to me. De Molay was silent for a long time, studying me with an expression I could not read. Then he said something that surprised me more than anything else that had happened in this strange journey. You think you found peace in exile? I read the reports from the lay brother who cared for that house. You were miserable, Arnaud. You were dying slowly from bitterness and regret, from the conviction that your life had been wasted, that you had been betrayed by everyone including God. You had no peace. You had resignation, which is not the same thing at all. And now, having completed this mission, having proven yourself in ways that matter more than any battle or siege, you want to return to that? Why? And I realized that he was right, that I had not found peace in those 15 years, had simply stopped looking for it, had settled for an existence that was neither happy nor meaningful but simply safe. The question was whether I had the courage now to seek something more, to risk the safety I had built for the possibility of actually mattering again, of serving a purpose larger than my own comfort or resentment. I thought about Brother Michel in Avignon, who had risked everything to do what he believed was right. I thought about the lay brother who had cared for me without judgment during my years of exile. I thought about my brothers who had died at Acre, who had fought to the end not because they expected victory but because their vows demanded it. And I thought about myself, about the knight I had been, and the man I had become, and the person I might yet choose to be. I will stay, I told de Molay. Not as a knight. I am too old for that, and my body is no longer what it was. But I will serve the order in whatever capacity you have need of me. Not because I am restored, not because I seek validation, but because I have learned something in these past months. That meaning is not found in safety or comfort, or even in being remembered, but in service, in doing what must be done regardless of cost or recognition, in keeping faith with who we are even when that faith demands everything from us. I will serve because it is who I am, because 15 years of exile did not change that fundamental truth, because I would rather die in the attempt to matter than live safely in obscurity. The arrests came 3 weeks later, on a Friday in October, just as de Molay had predicted. Philip's soldiers moved against every Templar house in France simultaneously, seizing brothers from their beds, dragging them to dungeons to face interrogation and torture and eventual execution. But the order was prepared. The document I had brought from Avignon had given us time to disperse our most important assets, to send many brothers to safety in other countries, to prepare legal defenses and appeals to higher authorities. We could not prevent the destruction of the order. Philip's power was too great, his determination absolute, the corruption too deep to overcome. But we ensured that the truth would be preserved, that history would record not just Philip's accusations but also his motives, that future generations would know we had been destroyed not for our crimes, but for our wealth. I was not arrested in that first sweep. My name was not on Philip's lists because it was not in the order's records, and I spent the next 7 years working in secret, carrying messages, managing funds that had been hidden, helping brothers escape to territories where Philip's reach did not extend. I was the forgotten knight, the ghost who did not exist in any record, and I used that invisibility to serve in ways the remembered brothers could not. Jacques de Molay was burned at the stake in the spring of 1314, 7 years after the arrests began. I was in the crowd that gathered to watch him die, hidden among the common folk, and I heard his final words as the flames began to rise, that he and the order were innocent, that King Philip and Pope Clement would answer before God's tribunal within a year. Both men were dead within months, Philip thrown from his horse, Clement taken by sudden illness, and people whispered that de Molay's curse had come to pass. But I knew better. It was not a curse that killed them, but simply time, the inevitable working out of causes set in motion years earlier. The order was destroyed, its properties seized, its mission ended. But we had not been forgotten. Not completely. The stories persisted, passed down through the centuries, and in those stories was a truth that Philip could not suppress. That we had been faithful to our vows, that we had served with honor, that we had been destroyed not for crimes, but for wealth and power, and the corruption of men who wore holy vestments while doing the devil's work. I am an old man now, past 70, my body failing, my time short. I have lived twice as long as I expected to live, have seen the complete destruction of the order I served and the vindication, partial though it may be, of our innocence. I think often about that morning when the letter arrived calling me from exile, about the choice I made to answer when I could have remained hidden, about the journey to Avignon, and the desperate flight back with the document that bought us time if not salvation. Was it worth it? Did my actions matter in the larger scheme of things? The order fell anyway. My mission changed nothing except perhaps the speed of our collapse and the clarity with which history would judge us. But I know now that meaning is not measured in outcomes, not weighed by whether our efforts succeed or fail, but found in the choosing itself, in the decision to serve even when service seems futile, to keep faith even when faith demands everything, to rise when we have been knocked down and walk forward even when we do not know where the path will lead. I was forgotten once, erased from the records, left to rot in exile for crimes I did not commit, but I returned one last time, and in returning I discovered that I had never truly been forgotten, not by God, not by the principles I had sworn to uphold, not by the man I had been before everything was taken from me. That man still existed, had always existed, waiting for the moment when he would be needed again. I answered the call. I completed the mission. I changed history, if only in small ways, if only in the preservation of truth for future generations who would read our story and understand that we were more than the accusations brought against us. That is enough. It has always been enough. Non nobis, Domine, non nobis, sed nomini tuo da gloriam. Not unto us, O Lord, not unto us, but to thy name give glory. These are the words I lived by, the words that sustained me through exile and restoration, and the final years of service. They will be the last words on my lips when death finally comes to claim me, when I pass from this world into whatever lies beyond. I was the forgotten knight who returned one last time, and in that returning, I remembered who I was and what I was meant to be, and that knowledge was worth everything it cost.